I always thought my marriage would be the stuff of Hallmark movies, the kind of suburban fairy tale where the husband grills steaks in the backyard while his wife brings out sweet tea and potato salad, and neighbors clap like extras in a 4th of July parade. But instead of a Hallmark movie, my life turned into some kind of late-night parody soap opera that you'd watch on a broken TV in a motel outside of Cleveland. Because, let's be honest, nobody really expects their college roommate, the guy who once lost his pants at a frat party and slept under a beer pong table, to become the main villain in a story of betrayal, cheating, toxic love, and yes, good old-fashioned infidelity. It started simple. My wife, who had the suburban glow of yoga classes and overpriced iced lattes, kept telling me she was just catching up with my old college buddy, the same guy who once tried to microwave a Pop-Tart in its foil wrapper. I thought, what could possibly go wrong? Because in American culture, we like to trust the people who shared cheap beer and broken dorm couches with us. Brotherhood, family, loyalty, that's what it's supposed to mean. Except loyalty in this story was about as real as a politician's campaign promise. The first red flag came when I found his hoodie in the laundry basket, smelling suspiciously like lavender detergent and betrayal. But I laughed it off because, hey, maybe he just spilled cologne on himself at Target. The second red flag came when she started calling him by his nickname from college, Rocket. You don't call another man Rocket unless you're launching some kind of mission, if you know what I mean. And then came the absurdity. One night I walked in after working late, carrying leftover pizza like the American hero of family dinners. And what do I see? Not just my wife and my roommate sitting on the couch. Oh no, they're watching The Bachelor together. And she's crying when some random contestant got rejected, crying with him, not with me. That's when I realized I wasn't just a husband. I was an unpaid extra in my own marriage. The conspiracy theories started in my head immediately. What if this was bigger than just cheating? What if my college roommate had been planted in my life years ago, like a sleeper agent of toxic love, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy my family? What if every beer we shared was part of his long game, every bro hug a setup, every, hey man, you're like a brother to me, secretly code for, one day I'll steal your wife and get her pregnant? American paranoia is a powerful drug, and let me tell you, once you start seeing your life through that lens, even the dog looks suspicious. The way he wagged his tail at my roommate, was that loyalty or betrayal? The way the neighbor waved from across the street, was he in on it too? Was this entire suburb just one giant Truman Show episode designed to humiliate me? I confronted my wife, of course. I demanded answers like an underpaid actor in a courtroom drama. She gave me lines straight out of a bad parody script. We're just friends. You're overreacting. It's not what it looks like. But if you live in America long enough, you know those lines are code for, yes, it's exactly what it looks like. But I'm going to gaslight you until you doubt your own eyeballs. The climax of part 1 came when she finally confessed, not just that she had been with him, but that she might be pregnant. Pregnant with his child. My college roommate, the guy who once failed Econ 101 because he thought the stock market was literally a place you buy socks, was now potentially the father of my wife's baby. And that's when the satire turned into something even darker. Because while she was crying and swearing it was a mistake, he had the audacity to sit there with his smug face, sipping my beer in my living room, as if he was the new king of this broken sitcom. My so-called brother, my so-called family, my so-called friend. He had crossed every American boundary of loyalty, and I was left standing in the wreckage like a man who just realized his entire life was written by a drunk scriptwriter from a reality TV network. But I didn't break. Not yet. No, I started plotting. Because this wasn't just a case of cheating or infidelity. This was betrayal on a biblical scale. And in America, when you get betrayed like that, you don't just cry into your Bud Light and move on. You plan revenge. You wait. You gather receipts, evidence, alibis. You turn your life into a Netflix revenge special. Because if my life was going to be a parody, then fine. I'd be the anti-hero. And if my wife and roommate thought this was over, they had no idea what was coming next. The thing about betrayal is that it never arrives quietly. It doesn't knock politely like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. No, betrayal crashes through the front door like an Amazon package hurled at the wrong address. And in my case, it came in the form of my wife announcing with trembling lips and mascara streaks that she was pregnant. Pregnant, and not even sure if the child was mine. It was the ultimate plot twist in this parody of a marriage, the kind of twist you'd expect from a late-night reality show where the audience gasps on cue. My college roommate, the same idiot who once lit fireworks inside our dorm bathroom, was suddenly cast as a potential father in the most toxic love triangle ever staged in suburban America. Now, if you've ever seen how Americans treat pregnancy scandals, you know it's not just gossip. It's national theater. Daytime TV feeds on this stuff. Maury built an empire yelling, "You are not the father." I started imagining myself on that stage, an entire studio audience chanting my name while I waved DNA test results like a Super Bowl trophy. But instead of applause, I was met with silence in my kitchen, the fridge humming louder than my wife's excuses, and the smug roommate sipping another beer like he had already won. Of course, my mind didn't stop at the pregnancy. No, my brain turned it into a full-blown conspiracy theory. What if the baby wasn't even mine or his? What if this was bigger than both of us, some kind of Truman Show plot where the whole suburb was in on it? I began to suspect everyone. The mailman who smirked a little too much, the neighbor who always waved with both hands, even the church pastor who preached about forgiveness a little too passionately. What if this wasn't just cheating, but part of a larger betrayal network designed to test how much humiliation a man could take before he snapped? But then came the American classic, the Facebook meltdown. Because in this country, private pain always finds its way to public social media. My wife, in her infinite wisdom, decided to post a vague status about going through something difficult but trusting the universe. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. Her yoga friends sent heart emojis, his old frat buddies sent fire emojis, and my aunt from Nebraska wrote, "Praying for your family." Family. As if this was still a family. As if betrayal and infidelity hadn't already burned that word to ashes. I couldn't take it. I needed answers, evidence, something tangible to cling to. So I did what any paranoid, revenge-hungry American man would do. I started investigating. I checked phone records. I followed receipts. I even went full conspiracy theorist and started mapping out connections with red string on a corkboard like I was solving a true crime podcast. And the deeper I dug, the more absurd it got. They weren't just meeting up for secret dinners. They had Spotify playlists together, shared Ubers, matching sneakers. It wasn't just an affair, it was a lifestyle. The roommate, emboldened by my silence, began acting like he was already part of the household. He'd slap the back of my chair during football games, call my dog by a nickname, even suggest new paint colors for the nursery. The audacity was so high it felt scripted, like some cruel sitcom written by demons. My wife giggled at his jokes, even the recycled ones I'd heard since freshman year. It was like watching my own life play out with me cut from the scene. That's when the paranoia flipped into dark comedy. Because if my life was going to collapse, I might as well narrate it like a satire. I started telling myself, this isn't real life, this is a parody, a twisted version of the American dream where the barbecue smoke is actually a smokescreen for betrayal, where the man you once called brother becomes the father of your wife's baby, and where revenge is the only logical next step. So I plotted. I kept my voice calm, my face steady, my actions small. But inside, I was gearing up for the long game. Not the quick explosion, not the dramatic slap you see on Bravo TV, but the cold-blooded, carefully staged kind of revenge that Americans secretly love. I imagined myself walking into court with a DNA test, standing tall as the audience of life gasped, and declaring that I wouldn't be the fool anymore. I would take their toxic love and turn it into their downfall. By the end of that week, I wasn't the broken husband anymore. I was the anti-hero of my own conspiracy story, the man who would turn betrayal into spectacle. My wife thought she had me cornered. My roommate thought he had won. But what they didn't know was that the second act of this absurd drama was about to begin. And in America, second acts are where the underdog rises, fueled by rage, humiliation, and the sweet promise of revenge. Revenge in America isn't just about screaming in the driveway or throwing clothes out the window like some reality show meltdown. No, true revenge is slow-cooked, like ribs at a backyard barbecue. Low heat, steady smoke, every detail planned until the meat falls off the bone. And that's exactly the recipe I started following once I realized my wife was entangled in toxic love with my college roommate. And infidelity had wrapped itself around my family like kudzu choking a tree. I started small, gathering evidence like a detective who binge-watched too many crime dramas. Phone records, Uber receipts, credit card statements, every betrayal had a paper trail, and America loves nothing more than a good paper trail. I kept a straight face at home, even managed a few fake chuckles at their inside jokes, but behind closed doors I was building a case worthy of a courtroom finale. I downloaded DNA test kits, bookmarked divorce attorneys, and even started drafting a speech in my head for when I would finally unleash the truth. Because if my life was going to be a parody, then fine, I'd at least direct the final act. The roommate, bless his clueless soul, acted like he was already stepdad of the year. He'd pat my dog on the head and say, "Daddy's home," not realizing I was 2 seconds away from teaching him the difference between a sitcom laugh track and real-life humiliation. He started leaving his sneakers by the door, his shampoo in the shower, his toxic love letters tucked inside my wife's purse. The man had no shame, and in America, lack of shame is basically a competitive sport. Meanwhile, my wife transformed into a character straight out of a soap opera. She'd cry one moment, swear she loved only me, then post Instagram stories with captions about finding light in dark times. Her toxic love for drama was more addictive than caffeine, and I realized she wasn't just betraying me. She was auditioning for some invisible audience. And if she wanted drama, I was ready to give her a finale so big it would make Shakespeare jealous. I began planting seeds of doubt. Casual comments here and there, "Funny how the baby's due date doesn't match our anniversary," or "Isn't it weird how Rocket suddenly loves kale salads?" I let paranoia do the heavy lifting. Americans thrive on paranoia. It's practically a national pastime. Within days, the tension in the house thickened, their whispers turned sharper, and I could see cracks forming in their little toxic love bubble. Infidelity, after all, is fun until someone holds up a mirror. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the DNA test results. I'll never forget opening that envelope, the sterile paper shaking in my hands like a prophecy. And there it was, in bold, clinical words. The baby was not mine. Relief and rage hit me at once, a twisted cocktail of freedom and fury. Because while I was no longer shackled to raising a child born of betrayal, I was also staring at the undeniable proof that my wife and my college roommate had reduced my family to rubble. But instead of screaming, I smiled. That was my revenge. The calm before the storm, the kind of eerie calm that makes Americans lean forward on their couches during courtroom shows. I decided to wait for the perfect stage, the perfect audience. And what better stage than a family gathering? In this country, family dinners aren't just about mashed potatoes and turkey. They're about confrontation, confessions, and if you're lucky, spectacular explosions. I invited everyone, parents, in-laws, cousins who hadn't been relevant since the Clinton administration. I set the table, poured the wine, carved the roast. I played the role of the devoted husband one last time, and then, when the plates were full and the laughter loud, I stood up with the DNA results in my hand like a preacher with a Bible. The silence that followed was biblical. I read every word. My wife froze, fork clattering against the plate. My college roommate, Rocket, turned pale, the kind of pale you only see in horror movies right before the monster pounces. My parents stared, mouths open, as if they'd just realized their American dream son had been living inside a nightmare sitcom. And me? I soaked it in. The betrayal was public now, the toxic love exposed, the infidelity carved into the family record. That night, I didn't just take back control. I rewrote the script. I wasn't the fool anymore. I was the man who turned cheating into spectacle, betrayal into justice, toxic love into fuel for the best revenge scene ever performed at a suburban dining table. And as I watched them squirm, humiliated in front of the very family they had disrespected, I knew part 4 of my story would be about more than survival. It would be about rebirth. There's a strange kind of silence that follows public humiliation, the kind where you can almost hear betrayal sizzling on the skillet like bacon on a Sunday morning. That was the silence in my dining room after I dropped the DNA bombshell. My wife stared at her plate as if mashed potatoes might offer her legal advice. My roommate Rocket sat frozen like a middle schooler caught cheating on a math test. And my entire family leaned back in their chairs with that awkward American politeness that says, we're horrified, but we're also here for the show. Because in this country, family dinners often end in either pumpkin pie or disaster, and this one ended in both. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't flip the table like a Bravo reality star. No, I just calmly folded the DNA papers, slipped them back into the envelope, and said, not mine. That's it. 2 words that detonated harder than fireworks on the 4th of July. My wife burst into tears. Rocket muttered something about working things out. And my father whispered to my mother, well, at least the meatloaf was good. That's American family loyalty for you. Betrayal on one side of the table, gravy boats on the other. The days that followed felt like living in a parody of the American dream gone wrong. My wife tried to spin it, telling friends it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, some kind of toxic love spiral she couldn't control. She claimed it wasn't infidelity, but a spiritual connection. Rocket, bless his delusional heart, tried to play stepdad before the baby was even born, bragging to anyone who would listen that he was starting a family. Except starting a family usually doesn't involve destroying another one in the process. Me? I didn't crumble. I filed the divorce papers, hired the kind of lawyer who smiles like a shark at feeding time, and prepared myself for the American courtroom showdown. You haven't lived until you've watched a judge raise an eyebrow at a man nicknamed Rocket as evidence of infidelity piles up like traffic on the I-405. Every receipt, every photo, every text message, my revenge wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, and cultural. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity in a society that thrives on drama. But here's the twist. Instead of sinking into bitterness, I started to laugh. Because when you look at your life as one giant absurd parody, you realize you've been given free material. I joined a support group, sat in a circle with men who'd been betrayed, cheated on, blindsided by toxic love. We swapped stories like war veterans. Except instead of grenades and rifles, our battles were fought with DNA tests, alimony, and custody agreements. In America, nothing bonds men faster than shared betrayal and bad coffee in a church basement. And slowly I started to rebuild. I found an apartment downtown with exposed brick walls and a sense of freedom. I hit the gym, got a haircut that didn't scream suburban dad, and even downloaded dating apps where I described myself as recently liberated from a toxic sitcom. Women laughed, swiped right, asked me to tell the story again, and I told it, because why not? My tragedy was also comedy, and in this culture, tragedy plus time equals entertainment. My wife? She faded into the background, swallowed by whispers and judgment. Rocket? He vanished from my life, probably trying to reinvent himself in another city, maybe telling people he was misunderstood, maybe still microwaving Pop-Tarts wrong. And me? I became the man who walked through betrayal, infidelity, and humiliation, and came out the other side not just alive, but stronger, sharper, and funnier. I realized something important too. Revenge isn't just about making the other person suffer. True revenge, the kind that actually matters, is about reclaiming yourself, about showing the world that betrayal didn't break you. It redefined you. And in my case, the revenge wasn't just the DNA reveal, or the courtroom victory, or the public humiliation. No, the sweetest revenge was waking up every day without that weight, that toxic love, that infidelity festering in my home. Freedom was the ultimate payback. So if you're wondering how my story ends, it ends like this. I caught my wife cheating with my college roommate. She got pregnant. I exposed the truth. I burned down the fake American dream they built on lies, and I walked away with my head high. They thought they'd destroyed me, but all they did was hand me the script to my own rebirth. And what I did next wasn't just revenge, it was resurrection. Because in America, nothing sells better than a comeback story. And mine? Mine is just getting started.